Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. Today we're discussing a 104-piece limited edition launched back in 2024. This is the Breitling Chronomat 42 NFL Collection Philadelphia Eagles series. So 104 watches for each of the 32 NFL franchises. This one right here for our hometown Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia, of course, being the reigning champion of the NFL, and this watch one of the best looking in the series, if I may share my opinion. There's a little bit of an underlying tone of teal to this dial, and yes, there's a subtle Eagles logo over at 9 o'clock, but from an arm's length, you really don't see it. It's just a very good looking 42mm stainless steel in-house caliber chronograph. So 42 in diameter. You can see that in profile, it's actually a reasonable 15.3 millimeters thick. 50.6 from lug tip to lug tip. It's got a 22mm spacing between the lugs. It wears like a tonneau case more than a round case. That said, because of the pivoted end links of the Rouleaux style bracelet, which is 80s inspired, this is an easy watch to wear. Comfortable. It's big, but I wouldn't describe it as oversized. I'd describe it as full-sized. You can see on my 16cm circumference wrist, it is a good fit. There are rubber straps available from Breitling for these, as well as leather straps. More on that in just a moment, but I'd recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference, so just a little bit smaller than mine. It is a very robust and well-assembled watch. The Rouleaux bracelets of the 80s were handsome, but they often felt a little bit like tinsel, whereas this feels like a modern, high-tolerance luxury product. You can see there's alternating polished intermediates. There is a pronounced taper down from the lugs, but you see how the bracelet itself is wider than the lug spacing? This is something you need to keep in mind if you're going to put this on an aftermarket strap. The lug spacing is 22mm, but the actual width of the OEM bracelets and straps a little bit wider than that. The shoulders extend over the lugs, not just the span between the lugs. We have this little bevel that runs down the side of the links. You can see that's on both the top and the bottom. You can see how the links are affixed by a combination of bars and sleeves. A very secure system, but if you want to size this at home, you will need a block and a punch. The clasp is a double closure. As you can see, we have a combination of the Breitling name and logo. No wings anymore. Breitling wants you to think of it as a land, sea, and air sports company, and of course this is the land sports side of things. Twin trigger release. You have to press both for this to open, so it will not open inadvertently. Again, easy to see why I describe this as a tonneau case. It is one. We've got a polished bevel that runs end to end. You can see the original owner of this didn't have a whole lot of fun. He more or less bought it, lost his nerve, and sold it. So it still has all of the original packing stickers on it. His loss is your gain. You will get a watch that is indistinguishable from mint. Taking a look at the crown side, you can see the crown is actually a onion style, characteristic of the Chronomat since Breitling reimagined the Chronomat in 1983. And by that I mean Breitling under the Schneider family, post-Breitling family. The original Chronomat was actually a calculator bezel chronograph that came out in the 40s. The Chronomat, as relaunched in the 80s under the Schneider ownership, was something between a dive watch and an aviation chronograph, and it featured elements like the rider tabs on the bezel and the onion-style crown, and back then the Rouleaux bracelet. So this is in a lot of ways very true to that original comeback watch for the Breitling brand. And you can see that the chronograph actuation triggers, they're polished and they're oval in cross-section. Screw-down crown, this is a 200-meter water-resistant watch, and once again, there are some dive elements here. We have this wonderful screw-fixed captive bezel. That means that the screws aren't just ornamental, they actually hold the bezel to the case, meaning you can't accidentally snap it off by impact. You have to disassemble it to remove it, which is great for durability, and very few brands take the time and money to assemble a bezel this way, Breitling being the largest by far that does this. The rider tabs were always envisioned to make it easier to grip the bezel when your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloved, so that's their purpose here. You can see there's some differential finish with satin and polish. It is a very refined but still well-defined 120-click unidirectional rotating dive bezel. We've got a big bezel pearl, easy to line up with the minute hand, so you can time two events concurrently with the chronograph and the bezel. Let's do a loom shot, get a good sense of how this watch looks in the dark. You can see that all of the hands on the dial are luminescent, including chronograph seconds and every sub-register, with a unique hammerhead-style hour index, very easy to read in the dark. Again, this meets the definition of a diver, so it can be your dive watch. Taking a quick look at the dial, you can see applique rhodium-plated hour indices and matching rhodium-plated hands. We have a tone-on-tone treatment. Eagles colors, of course, we have Eagles green and then the white. And outboard, we've got two different scales. One, the tachymeter, can be used in conjunction with the chronograph to gauge the speed of an object, such as a race car across a kilometer, or if you're very good with mental decimals, I suppose you could time a offensive run down the field and clock that runner in Philadelphia on the Eagles. Again, you'd have to apply some mental decimals because pretty sure no one runs at 500 kilometers per hour. But again, that is how you use the tachymetric scale. Start it when the interval begins, stop it when the interval ends, then you look, and that's the speed. Also important to note right here, there is a 100 calibration inboard of that, and a lot of people ask me, what is that? That is called a decimeter scale, and it hasn't been used widely for decades, but once upon a time, in certain technical applications, hundredths of a minute were considered to be a relevant measure, and so that's where that comes from, even if it's not exactly the most practical thing. You can see that there is a lovely varnishing of the chronograph hands. You can see a very subtle gray-green varnishing of chronograph seconds, minutes, and hours. Now, in terms of other functions, we do have a hacking seconds function, so you can bring everything to a halt and synchronize the watch to the second against a reference time. There's also a quick set, so you can rapidly cycle the date should the watch run down or encounter an irregular length month. Chronograph. Let's talk about the chronograph features. We got a vertical clutch, so when you start the chrono, the seconds hand doesn't jump or stagger. And then if you want, you can leave it running full time. That's one of the advantages of a vertical clutch. It doesn't create any additional wear and tear. So if you just like having your hours, minutes, and seconds at center, ignore the other chronograph registers, leave it running. Now, in terms of the column wheel, the clutch engages. The column wheel is like the traffic cop, starting, stopping, and resetting the chrono. And it's the way traditional chronographs, and in my opinion, the best chronographs, are built. Not all column wheels are created equal, though. And I've always thought that despite its mid-market pricing, the Breitling B01 has one of the most positive chronograph feels on the market. It's very snappy. I'd compare it with something like a Rolex 4130 and its derivatives, and the Zenith El Primero Caliber 400 and its derivatives. It's not quite as silky as a dotograph, but it's very positive. It has a nice sharp click. It's what you would expect on an expensive instrument. This movement, which sits underneath an NFL logo, is Breitling's in-house caliber. Though not originally designed with display casebacks in mind, it turned out to be a good one. It looks great. It's large enough to handle a big case, and so although not originally designed to be seen in the era of display caseback Breitlings over the last 8 years or so, it has acquitted itself well. Automatic winding, it's got a 70-hour power reserve, a 4 hertz beat rate, it moves on 47 pivot joules, it's got the vertical clutch, the column wheel, hacking, a quick set date, and a 5-position adjustment and a COSC Swiss chronometer certification. You can see that it's got a unique adjustment system where you've got Edicron with the silver and the gold key for fine timing and beat error correction. Then you've got a micrometric, and I do mean a micrometric eccentric screw regulator for making adjustments of less than 5 seconds per 24 hours. You can also see a little bit unconventionally, Breitling uses KIF shock protection instead of the more common Inca block. A really cool watch that just happens to be Philadelphia Eagle themed. Now, from an arm's length, it's probably not that noticeable. If you are a fan of a competing city, well, then maybe it's a no-go. But if you just want a really great-looking green-themed chronograph, you can't do much better. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.